Hi, everybody. Welcome to First Church, First Center here in New York City. It's good to see all your faces on the board. I have to always remember to welcome the people who are watching us also on YouTube and Facebook throughout the week. We get all your comments, and we do our best to get back to everybody. There's a lot of people. If you have a specific question, please send it into the center. Though we do have our man Suzu, who responds for us and then brings things to our attention. So this is our self-healing class based upon Louise Hay's book, which I have in my hand, You Can Heal Your Life. Also, it's based upon the work of Ernest Holmes, who wrote the book, well, he wrote a lot of books, but the Science of Mind textbook, Religious Science. So let's get into the lesson. We've had several names for this lesson. It's evolved over the years too. It originally was one of Louise Hay's, but there's been a lot added to it, improvements made. It's about changing your story, and really it has to do with the subject of change itself. So again, good evening. I know some of you are signing on still. We're a welcoming community. We're here to transform lives for empowered living. And we're about the subject of God and good. I remember Dwayne Gaines. Many of you know my stories now as well as I know them. She's a prosperity teacher. I've recently done a lesson about her. And she would always talk about, to us, the students, to keep on seeing the God or the good. And she would use the word God and good interchangeably. So if we're learning here to be in this teaching and lift up our consciousness, we understand that this source, this God, is one with us. We have an expression which is, there's not a spot where God is not. So whatever you're looking at, whatever you're observing in your own apartment or around your room, it's all alive and it's all spirit. So your spirit, what you're looking at is spirit, everything you can observe and think about, wherever your mind can go, in the outer, or however you can go on the inner, it's the same stuff. The whole universe is alive, and it's alive in you. So when we come into a teaching like this and you hear people talk about the God and the good, they're really talking about the same thing. If they're talking about there's not a spot where God is not, they're really saying that we live in this, as Deepak Chopra would say, this unitary field. That was Chopra's word. Well, what does he mean by a unitary field? He's saying we live in a field where there's this divine energy. And we don't realize it half the time because we're reacting to everything, many of us. But eventually we wake to it. We wake to the realization that I live in it, I move in it, and I have my being in it. And then there's another startling revelation, which is it responds to me. So many of the people come to us through other teachings, let's say Gabby Bernstein or some of the New Age type folks, and they'll talk about the energy and they'll talk about the law of attraction. And we've been teaching and talking about those very subjects for generations. But however they come to us, it's great. Louise Hay was absolutely wonderful because when she wrote the book, You Can Heal Your Life, she introduced the teaching, which she studied here in New York. She introduced the teaching of the science of mind to millions upon millions of people that otherwise they never would have heard of us. So I don't know what the future is really for the science of mind, but new thought is not new. New thought's been around for many hundreds of years. As we say, there's nothing new about it. So we're here to learn about it, and we're here to learn how to practice it. And we're here to talk about the God and the good. So I want you to understand that you can use those words interchangeably. We're here to lift ourselves up. We're here to learn to love ourselves more. That's a big key point in Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life. We're here to lift ourselves up, love one another, love ourselves more. Louise, in her title of our book said, we can heal our life. And we're here to learn more about the energy that we call creative intelligence. Every single one of you have this creative intelligence in you, operating through you. This inner intelligence serves as a guiding energy. You know, I've always known it's there. I didn't always know how to use it. So we have this inner guiding thing. Someone told me years ago, we have an internal guidance system. When I was younger, I could tune it out because I could live in such a way, you know, there'd be, I don't know, I was drinking and, you know, just living a kind of a fast life, and I just didn't really want to listen to it. But if I want to be honest with myself, it's always been there at every point in my life. If we learn to slow down and we learn to listen, it will start to illuminate our path. It'll make our lives more fun, actually, and certainly more fulfilling. We will be happier, and in the process of learning to love ourselves, we'll be helping other people too. As we become integrated and whole, we become lighter. And see, when I was younger, you know, coming from the religion I came from, there wasn't much talk about personal happiness or fulfillment. It was a lot of talk about sacrifice and offering things up and helping others. And certainly there's nothing wrong with that idea. We all are, I think everybody I know wants to help one another and help the planet. But we weren't really good at, you know, positive messaging to ourselves coming out of many of those traditional faiths. So when we gather together here week by week, be it Wednesday, Thursday, or Sunday, Wednesday we have a creative living series. I don't usually present that, but I'm here every week. When we gather on Thursday, we're reviewing Louise Hay's material, You Can Heal Your Life, which is really an introduction to the science of mind teaching. And Sunday, there's always a lesson, and we try to have an opportunity for people to share and say, hi, I'm from Alabama, or I'm from Washington State, or, you know, people call from all over the place. We give you an opportunity to say hello. We're always thrilled to hear from you. And we gather each week, first of all, to learn about this power and learn how to use it. And we can remind ourselves that we can do it, as Louise Hay would say. What can we do? We can heal our lives. We can improve the circumstances in our lives. Louise Hay used to be a student right here in this very New York center. She was, I believe, working under the first pastor and perhaps the second. And so right here from our podium, this is where she learned the science of mind and how to do her practice. And Louise said, spiritual work is inner work. And so the question comes up with Louise Hay and all that we do. It's a question, the question comes up, are you willing personally to do anything to change? A question Louise would often ask, and I'll ask it again of everyone today. You don't have to answer, but I just want you to think about it. I'll ask it of myself also, and the audience. You know, you could ask yourself, am I willing to change? Or if you think about your life, I remember a book I was very fond of probably 20 years ago, and it was entitled The One Thing. And that book doesn't exist anymore. There is a book that's called that name, but it's not the same book. But the question that was asked was, are you willing to change the one thing? And the one thing was always that thing that was within you as you just give yourself like a little bit of an inventory. The thing that you've done or the thing that you're doing that you know is messing you up, that's screwing up your relationships or your job, or, you know, there's always, it seems, with everybody something, or maybe there's a few things. And here we are in a transformational teaching, and the question comes up, are you willing to change? And changing could be just the way you look at something, or it might be changing a behavior that you're used to doing. This thing that, if you ask that question, you have to know energetically on some level whatever you're doing isn't really working for your highest good. So perhaps there's someone on the call that feels that they're just too critical of themselves, or they're too judgmental, or maybe you know that you're too reactive. There's a long list of things that people criticize themselves about. And in every case, when we're doing it, we feel bad. And it's going to be different for every person. So if there's 50 or 100 people on the call tonight, I haven't heard the number from Jimmy yet, everyone's got something. For some people, it might be envy. Other people, it could be there's something you're jealous about. For other people, maybe the challenge you have is that you're blaming people a lot, or you're complaining a lot, or that you're feeling ashamed or shamed. And the list goes on and on. But the question comes up, are you willing to change whatever that one thing is? Again, there used to be a book. Don't look for that book because you'll find the wrong one, because I've tried myself to find it. But that question's still a good question. And for some of you, as you think about, am I willing to change this one thing, there might be a list of 5 or 6 things that come up. And don't use this question or this exercise as a way to find fault with yourself, Louise Hay said. Just use it as a methodology for you to become aware that I'm doing something here that's self-defeating. Every time I'm being critical and I'm being really awful and I'm putting myself down, or I'm putting my friend down, or my family member, that's a much bigger statement about me than it is about them. Took me a long time to realize that. Probably a good 10, 15 years or longer. Whenever you find yourself complaining about some person, place, or thing or fact of your life, it's a bigger statement about you. So you've heard me say from previous classes, if you spot it, you got it. When I was in early recovery 43 years ago, I've told this group before, I was kind of smart. After a while, I could tell you what was wrong with everybody. That wasn't, it was only a few months later, the sponsors and people are saying, Greg, the reason you can see it is these are your unhealed areas. As you really grow spiritually and grow in recovery, you're going to find that you're at peace. When people are doing things that are all kind of crazy, you're going to come to a place and you're going to say, okay, well, I'm okay with that. Whoever they are, wherever they are, they're doing whatever they're doing. From the American Indians, we don't judge anybody unless we've walked a mile in their moccasins. So from that also comes the idea to let go and let God. And from Science of Mind, and with Louise Hay, you're going to understand another concept, which is perfect place, perfect time, and all the time. And so what that is saying is, I'm evolving. Thankfully I've grown a lot, but I have a lot more growing to do. And I would say that's true for all of us. And the people in our lives that maybe the old way we'd handle it would be we would judge them and talk about what's wrong with them and what's missing and all that and label them in some way. If I'm doing all that labeling and judging, I promise you the person who's got the big problem is me. So I want to release the need to have an opinion about people, places, and things. And I want to realize that life is evolving, the perfect time, perfect place. And the healing we do always is self-healing. I was reminded as I was putting this lesson together, I have a friend who's very, very critical. And she claims to know the science of mind. And she's known it for years, no less. And I can't recall having a conversation with her at any point really where it's upbeat or positive. I mean, every once in a while there might be something, where I see that she laughs. I can get her to laugh. But it's really rare to even hear laughter. Most of the time it's just, what's wrong? And I'm sure everybody on the call knows someone who's a little bit like that. Or worse, maybe you're like that. We're just always negative, always negative. Or you might be a person like Louise Hay depicted, who's always using the word should. And I remember laughing like crazy when I first encountered You Can Heal Your Life. She'll say, you might notice if you use the word should 47 times a day, she said it might indicate a pattern of rigidity within you. And I laughed. I thought, it's funny because If you're doing that, using that word that often, it means you got all kinds of issues, control issues. And I embarked immediately once I encountered that whole idea to eliminate the word should, and then I found I got pretty ingenious of using words like must and you have to, and all these command phrases. And what we're moving towards here is a different type of approach. She called it the positive approach, where you never, never, never criticize yourself. And then by the same token, you don't should on other people. She said, how do you feel when people say that to you? You should have done this. You should have been here earlier. You should lose weight. You should do this. You should do that. Nobody likes being on the receiving end of that word. And there's got to be another way. Years ago, I started to get creative with that because I like ideas and I like presenting ideas. So I would language something. If her name were Mary, I would say, Mary, have you thought about you might try this way, or you could try it another way. And then I would always say, unless you have a better idea. If you want to make suggestions to people, give them choices. It might be better not to make the suggestions, but that's entirely up to you. But the last thing we want to be doing is telling people what to do, shooting on them or making them wrong. That's one of those words when you use it, in most every case, maybe not every case, but most every case, you're making yourself wrong or you're making someone else wrong. So I was talking about this friend of mine who's not a conversation that's ever positive. Do you know anybody like that? Or the words, are you like that? Because if you are, then, why don't you consider changing that story around? Very few people in my life have ever known that quite as negative as that person. You might be like another person I know. I sometimes talk of a lady, Susan. She's no longer on planet Earth. But she used to be one of my favorite students, and she was with me for a number of years, and certainly one of the smartest. And she's a really attractive lady in her mid-50s, as I remember, and she loved Louise Hay, and she loved Science of Mind. But there was one area in her life where something happened to her when she was a young kid, and it was 50 years before. And she would come to me all the time, and she'd open up in classes, and she says there's one person in her life that she will never, ever forgive. And she was holding on to a tremendous amount of anger. And she said, I love you, Greg. I love Science of Mind. I love Louise Hay. And when any of the group, the class, tried to suggest to her that finding a way to forgive, hanging on to this amount of anger would do her harm, I remember really well, to me, she said, get real. I'll never forgive this so-and-so. In other words, I'm with you in all things, and Louise Hay and Ernest Holmes, but when it comes to this person, I'm never gonna, And she was perhaps one of the nicest people I'd known up to that point in time, one of my great fans. But, I want to tell you, a couple years later, she passed away with a massive heart attack, and she was, I believe, 57 years old at the time. And the lesson I learned from that is, no matter what, and no matter who was trying to suggest to her the value in changing her perspective, she wasn't willing. And as a result, her health went to hell, and she gained a lot of weight, a lot of things. And as smart as she was and as loving and kind she was to the world, she could not do that for herself. And I always felt disappointed in myself that I couldn't find a way to get through to her. So today, as we bring this lesson to home, you might feel like you've failed at something before. You might have even tried to change your thinking before. And you might have given up. Many people come into these classes and they think, geez, this is too much. I want to go to a church where I can be redeemed or saved, and everybody will take away the pain. But this isn't that type of church. We are a spiritual organization. We talk about a teaching that's liberating. We talk to you about the idea that you are one with the one energy, you're one with this one God, and you have the power to change and heal your life. So you might have tried it before, you might have given up, before, as we say, you've had the positive demonstration, or you might have given up before the miracle happened. The question I have for everyone today, are you willing to try again? And some of you I know are actually practicing the teaching, and for you I say congratulations for tuning in week by week, because we will continually remind you, that your value cannot even be established. You are one with God, you are a spiritual being, and we're grateful that you're here with us, just being reminded of how great thou art. And so as you come and join with us, you help lift us all up. All of us, I think, are working on ourselves. And we are making progress personally, and the group comes along, we lift everybody else up. If today, for example, from your perspective, it's been lousy, if you're one of the folks on the call who's just had a rough day, where everything seems to be going wrong, I want to really especially congratulate you for being here, because that shows what your intention is. I'm going to remind you from my early days in recovery and in Science of Mind that it's never too late to start your day over. And you might say, well, God, it's after 7 p.m. I'll start tomorrow. And the better way is to start now, to stop whatever it is that you've been thinking. Let yourself be in a new moment. Wherever you find yourself in a funk, don't let yourself put off whatever it is until tomorrow. You don't want to lull in any state of consciousness where you're feeling sorry for yourself or anything else. Starting here, starting now. Raymond Charles Barker said, yesterday ended last night. I'm going to I'm going to echo that. I'm going to say it's never too late to start your day over right now. If you're a good metaphysical student, you're going to realize that everything is happening in the now. So here we are tonight, and there's always a good number of you listening on YouTube this week. Suzu gives our reports. I think there's like 155 to 60 signups every week. So it's tough for us to track the people that are getting the message, but we're grateful of all the people who are benefiting from what we do. Tonight you might ask yourself, am I willing to change the way I think about myself? Do I realize that there's such a high cost to the negatives that I have within me? The critical thinking I have. That's Raymond Charles Barker's famous talk, the high cost of the negatives, the critical thinking. See, if you have a great analytical mind, you've been blessed with a great mind, but oftentimes it's working against us. Am I willing to love myself enough to give myself a break? Am I willing to give whatever it is in my life? Am I willing to give whoever it is in my life a break? Whoever it is that's irritating you, are you willing to give them a break? Is there anything within you that represents a lingering resentment that you have toward anyone? And the question is, are you willing to let it go? Are you willing to let it all go? The people you have strong opinions against and all that stuff, because I promise you, it's not hurting them. Louise, when dealing with cancer, she said, I had to get at the underlying patterns in me. She said, because until I did, I'm going to keep going to the surgeon. They're going to be taking away pieces, from me. So is there any conflict in your life now, or is there any place in your life where you've got judgment or conflict or resentments? And are you willing to see this situation or this person as a situation that's resolved? Are you willing to see this person as whole and complete and doing the best they can with what they know? You can say to yourself in these moments, I have the power to see this differently. I have the power to see peace instead of this. And if you do, then go for peace. Say, I know that this is resolved in the mind of God. I know this person is doing the best they can with the information they have. When everyone around you is embroiled in a fight or a bunch of gossip, or you're hanging with a group of people with a lot of negativity. Are you strong enough not to go there with them? If you're taking this teaching seriously, you're going to find a way to, excuse yourself, move into a different conversation. It's later than any of us think. You are the author of your own life. You're creating your own experiences. I was told 30 years ago that I can commune with some of the greatest minds that have ever lived. I don't have to watch what's on network television every night. I can read. Now I can watch YouTube. I can watch TED Talks. I can watch things that are humorous. I can do anything that I need to do to lift myself up. I don't have to hang out with the negative ones. Because, if you go back to Emerson, they say a few from every age will discover him, which they're not talking about him personally. They're talking about the consciousness that was in Ralph Waldo Emerson, the consciousness that was in Louise Hay. If you want to be like that, you certainly can be like that. It just requires being mindful of your thoughts and having the willingness to change your thinking. And as you do, you will change your life. Here's the thing. We're not mindful all the time, not even close to all the time. What we are here is we're in a practice where we're learning to remember the truth of every situation. Let me give you an example or two. Sometimes in the face of unexpected challenges, people lose their cool in the most unexpected ways, and sometimes it's even amusing. I remember a time spilling a coffee on my white shirt, it wasn't that long ago, and quickly reacting, I accidentally knocked over a pitcher of water that went all over my lesson, destroying my lesson, and that made me 10 minutes late for delivering the message. And it was a calamity. In retrospect, I could laugh about it, but I wasn't very happy at the time. Recently, we had a speaker who was running late, stuck in traffic behind what was described as a slow-moving vehicle, and frustrated beyond all belief, honking her horn, wildly waving her hands and using, the gestures that were used, in frustration, and then even resorting to making exaggerated hand and facial gestures. So you get the picture. And yelling, through closed windows, and somehow thinking that would all make it move faster, traffic move faster. These moments, while amusing, funny, can highlight how easily we get caught up in being reactive. I call those type of moments where I lose it, my gotcha moments. Do you have any gotcha moments? Where you've been doing well and things start happening, then gotcha. It's like, oh my God, it's just like where you're giving your power away. And you go from one thing to another. In these types of situations, it's important to remember that we have the power to choose how we respond. Instead of escalating the situation or dwelling on negativity, we have the power to stop. We can stop in the name of love. We can just take a breath. We can take a pause. We'll take a pause that will refresh us, as you hear us say. So you can see and know that there's good in God. There's a silver lining. And then we can get back to that inner knowing that all is really well. And we start again. And then we start from connection, we start with grace and composure. Remember always the line I tell you every week. I can see peace instead of this. I can see peace instead of anything if I really want to. That's how you practice this teaching. You keep on practicing saying there is God here, there is presence here. Meaning, I know God and good are here now. The question comes up for us again tonight's lesson. Do you want to change? You say yes. Well, if you're saying yes, then great. Do you want to take this teaching to a much higher level than you might have before? Would you like to level up, or do you want to talk about leveling up? So that's up to you. This can be a very, very deep teaching, or it can be very, very simple. It's all very simple in one sense, but you can take it to a much deeper place. Do you want to take it to a deeper place? Then if you do, then you want to do as Ernest Holmes was suggesting, to begin to live and commune with this inner spirit, and let it inform you, and let it guide your steps and your decisions. So if you want to take it to a much higher place, then we can. Would you like to? So I say good. If you said yes, then I'd like you to repeat to yourself that it's all God and it's all good. And what do I mean by that? I said it's all God and it's all good. If you live with the understanding that you live, move, and you have your being in this divine energy, then it's only, all it is God, it will only ever be God. So you get to wake up to the realization, it's God realization, that I am one with the one. I live and move and I have my being in this field of energy. It responds. It responds to my negative thinking. It responds to my positive thinking. And we wake up to the idea that I have the power to make all things new with this awareness that I have. I release the need to be stuck in a circular story of ain't it awful and poor me. As you wake up to the truth of who you are, you cease to be upset with the world because you know everything is God unfolding in divine right order. If you can bring yourself to this kind of realization, which you can if you want to, if you can bring yourself to the realization that you are one with this one loving creative energy, you're going to be living in a far more peaceful world with a much different perspective because you're going to be seeing the good in the God in the good. As we do this, we can navigate life's challenges with a much lighter heart and a far clearer mind because you're not all fogged up with what's wrong and what's missing and what's wrong in others because you're doing the work where we want to be doing the work, which is in consciousness, in our own consciousness. As we're learning to love ourselves in this way, you're giving people permission to be themselves. You're not shooting on anybody or telling anybody what to do. You're realizing that your work is done at home. It's a journey always, you hear me say often, without a distance. So the work you're doing is, head to heart. It's a journey. And I certainly know, and I can promise, that there's going to be moments where you will lose your cool. And I lose my cool far too often. But these moments become less and less as we do the work. And you will level up. You will start to become a little bit unflappable because the stuff that's going on everywhere around you won't bother you so much. One of my favorite recovery programs taught me 43 years ago a very important line, which was, willingness is the key that opens the door. So the question is, are you willing to set aside the things that are working against you in exchange for the things that will lift you up? So awareness is always the first step in healing or changing. When we have some pattern buried deep within us, we must be aware of it in order to heal the condition. So perhaps we begin to mention the condition. We see ourselves complaining about it, or we've seen it in other people. Eventually, it rises to the surface, gets our attention, and somehow we begin to relate to it. We will attract the right people into our lives, teachers, friends, or others, books. Things show up at the right time. And they're all happening, not to you, but for you. My awakening began with a chance remark of a friend who'd been told about a Louise class. My friend didn't go, but I went a week or two later, and I've been going ever since for the past 30 plus years. This chance meeting, was the first step on my pathway to unfoldment. I didn't recognize the significance of it at the time until much later. Often our reactions to these things don't make sense. We don't even know why we're doing them. But we also have resistance, and all I can say to everybody is, stay the course. Don't quit before the miracle happens. At this point, I just want to hear how you're doing with change and if you have the willingness to change, or if you find yourself being stuck.